we need to talk a little bit about mindset. I believe mindset is 80% of your success because it feels like you're begging, you're coming from a place of lack. It's just not a very good feeling. That's why most people wouldn't want to do that. A step-by-step process to systematically reach out to people they know and raise funds without actually having to ask anybody for money. And he was talking for 40 minutes on stage, and his one message was, you need to be known. On his social media alone, he had raised something like $300 million just from people who knew him through his social media. Hello and welcome to the Property Magic Podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to share with you how you can find cash investors. Now, why is this important? Well, the reality is, even if you have your own money to invest with, whether that's savings or equity, at some point, most investors run out of their own cash. And what that means is they have to stop investing. However, the secret is that most successful investors will use our money and we use other people's money. And when you know how to find really good, profitable property deals, there's plenty of profit for you to be able to afford to pay someone else who puts the money in for you. Now, before we talk about specifically what you can do to find these cash-rich investors, we need to talk a little bit about mindset. I believe mindset is 80% of your success. You might know exactly what to do, but if you don't have the right mindset, I mean the right attitudes and belief, then that can stop you from moving forward and taking action on the things you know you need to do. So let's talk a little bit about mindset. And there are a couple of things that come up for most people when we talk about finding private investors. The first one is, well, why on earth would someone lend money to me? People also think about, well, I don't know anybody with money. Let's talk about those two things first of all. So the reason why someone would lend money to you is not out of the goodness of their own heart. It's because you can help them make money. And this is a really important concept. You see, if I said to you, right, I want you to imagine going to speak to one of your friends, family members, work colleagues, and asking them for money, most people would feel uncomfortable asking someone else for money because it feels like you're begging, you're coming from a place of lack. It's just not a very good feeling. That's why most people wouldn't want to do that. However, let me do a little bit of coaching for you, because instead of going to someone with kind of empty hands as if you're begging, how about you go to them coming from a place of opportunity and explaining you have some very profitable property deals and you're looking for some people who might want to share some of your profit. And that's a totally different proposition, but you're still effectively doing the same thing. You're finding out who might want to come and finance some of your property deals. So by offering people a share of the profits, and that might be a fixed rate, it might be a share of actual profits. There are many different ways you can do it. And by the way, you should not and cannot advertise, I'm offering X%, because that's called a financial promotion. And unless you're regulated by the FCA, you shouldn't do that. So I teach my students to actually never actually offer a particular interest rate. What you want to do, once you've got someone who is interested and they've got some funds, you might talk to them about what they might actually want in return for lending money to you. And we can never make assumptions because we just don't know. So the first challenge is, well, who would lend money? Why would someone lend money to me? Is because you can help them make money. Now, very often people say, well, that's fine, but I don't know anybody with money. And again, I think that's a bit of a big, probably incorrect assumption. The reality is, here in the UK, people don't like talking about money. People who have money don't really talk about it. It's not seen as etiquette to do it. It's rather uncouth if someone's talking about all the money they have. So people generally don't do it. And so you might well know some people who do have money in the bank. Maybe they've got some savings or some inheritance or a windfall cash payment they've had for insurance claim or so whatever it is, they've got money, but you just don't know they've got money. And so I'm pretty sure that some people you know will definitely have cash. If, however, it is true that nobody you know has any money at all, my tough love to you would be, you know what? You need to change the circle of people with whom you are spending most of your time, because we become like the people we spend our time with. And if you're hanging around people who really have no money, you will just be the same as them. It's very difficult to break out of that. So you need to change the circle of people who you spend your time with and start mixing with people who do have some money. Now, the other thing I want to talk about here is obviously if you have your own money, of course, use that first. Sometimes people take what I say literally about you should always use other people's money, and they've got their own cash and they're getting stressed about finding other people. Look, if you've got your own money, use that first. Or maybe you don't have cash in the bank, but you've got equity in your own home or other investment properties or inherited property. Those properties could be refinanced. You could use that money as a deposits to grow your investment portfolio. So using your own cash, savings or equity is always the best thing to do first, because the cost of borrowing is going to be so low. If you're using someone else's money, you're obviously going to be paying a higher interest rate. Now, depending who that is, that interest rate might vary. You might be surprised. Within property circles, if you go to property network meetings like PIN, there are people at PIN meetings who will very happily lend you money at 10 or even 12% per year. Once, of course, they get to know you. A common mistake people make, they go to a network meeting expecting to see queues of people lining up with badges saying, I'm an investor, come and speak to me. It doesn't quite work like that. For someone to lend you money, they need to know you, like you, and trust you. But absolutely, there are people who go to network meetings. There are people who go to property training events who have money, who want to invest in property. That's why they're going to paid training events. But you know what? They, at the event, realize that there's actually quite a bit of work in property, and there is work involved in property, and they might be very well paid, but very busy, and they don't have the time to do it themselves. And they would love to work with someone like you who's also been educated to a good level and knows what they're doing, and maybe you could work together for mutual benefit. So going to paid property training events and also going to property network meetings is a really good way of meeting investors. But before you do that, there's an even better source of people who could fund your property deals. And that is people who you already know. People who know you, like you, and trust you. So I'm talking about your friends, your family members, and current and former work colleagues. As long as they like you and they trust you, if they have money available, once they know that you are investing in property, and it's important that they do know that, because otherwise they might not associate you with property investing. It might be something you're new that you're doing. So telling people that you are training, you're learning how to do this properly, rather than making the expensive mistakes that most people make when they try and do it on their own. So the very fact you're investing in yourself and doing paid training makes you more investable. Because anyone who lends money to you, they want to make sure that you know what you're doing and you're not going to lose their money. And of course, you do need to know what you're doing, and you do need to make sure you don't lose their money. In fact, you should be more careful with their money than you are with your money. So if you're doing some sort of training, put pictures up on social media, let people know you're training, you're educating yourself to find really good property deals. And then your family, your friends, your workers, they'll start to notice that you're doing property. And again, they might become interested, especially when they see you getting results and starting to make money, and they might want to work with you. And so that's when you can start to approach people. But remember, you never have to ask people for money. And I teach my students not to ask for money. So instead, you tell people what you're doing. And if they're interested, you say, hey, look, do you know anyone who might be interested in sharing some of the profit I'm making from my property deals? So family, friends, work colleagues, they are absolutely the best people to work with. And right now on my mastermind program, we're going through some training where I'm teaching them a step-by-step process to systematically reach out to people they know and raise funds without actually having to ask anybody for money. And now, as I record this podcast, you're going to be listening to this. This is a great time of year for you to be raising money. The reason is in December, you are going to be seeing people who maybe you haven't seen for a year. Maybe they're old work colleagues who get together once a year at Christmas. Maybe they're family, relatives, and relations you literally only see at Christmas. And you should tell them what you're doing. Be excited about your property investing business. And some of them might be kind of interested in what you're doing, and you can talk about the projects you're doing and just share with them what's going on. And sometimes people worry about posting on social media. What will people think? Well, here's the thing. If you tell people what you're doing on social media, you're not boasting, you're not bragging, you're just sharing what's going on for you in your life. And that's what social media is all about. But if people around you don't know what you're doing, they don't know you're investing in property, why on earth would they think about lending you any money for your investing? So you have to be known. I remember seeing Grant Cardone, the American sales expert, sales trainer and property investor. He has a very big fund called Cardone Capital, and they buy big development blocks. And I saw him speak at an event. I'm always going to events, business events, marketing events to try and get better, speaking events. And he was at this big business event speaking. And I was sitting right in the front row, VIP seats. I always go VIP if I possibly can. And he was talking for 40 minutes on stage. And his one message was, you need to be known. You need to be known. And he was explaining how back in about 2009, he was getting on Instagram and Facebook posting, and his friends saying, what do you know if you're on Instagram? That's for kids, right? And over the years, he's built up millions and millions of followers on his social media platforms. And I'm not suggesting you do that. It's just a principle I'm sharing. But he was sharing at this presentation. This was just before, this was 2019. And he shared how that year on his social media alone, he had raised something like $300 million just from people who knew him through his social media. Many of them he'd never actually met before, but they just connected with him. They got to know him through social. They saw what he was doing and they wanted to invest to get a great return on their money. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute you need to go and raise 300 million, but many of our students, by getting on social media, by telling everybody they meet what they do and how they're doing it, they attract people to them who might want to work with them and fund some of those property investments. So the way to raise money, the way to meet investors is think about people you already know, friends, family, work colleagues, tell them what you do, tell them about your property investing and ask them that question about who they might know, who might want to share some of your profits, and then get yourself out to property events. The benefit of going to property events, networking and training events is those people already know about property. They understand that property is a good thing. Whereas some of your family and friends and work colleagues, they may recognize that property is a good investment, but they don't really understand themselves and they're quite nervous and dubious and they wonder, is it a good time to be investing? Whereas people who are in property, they know it's a great time. And if you're finding great deals, they might be very open to working with you and funding some of your deals. So get yourself out there, get yourself known. I think since COVID, too many people have become very comfortable sitting at home, doing virtual events, watching videos. You've got to remember that property is a people business. It's all about relationships. Your network is your net worth. So I highly encourage you to push your comfort zone. Get out and go and meet other people within your industry because they are people who can help you on your property journey. With that in mind, the January PIN meetings are always very, very busy. So I highly recommend you come and book your place at the January PIN. There's going to be a link in the show notes. You can go to www.pinmeeting.co.uk. List all the meetings around the UK and in the Netherlands as well. Book yourself into your local meeting. Take plenty of business cards with you because it's a great place to meet and connect with people. And when you meet people, rather than just giving them your card, collect their card and schedule a follow-up meeting with them as well. And recognize that you can't just go to one meeting. You need to commit to your success and keep going to meetings so you get to become a known face. People get to know you, like you, and trust you. And that's how you can raise money from people who you didn't know previously, who are into property, who've got funds available. It's about building those relationships. But you need to get out there and meet those people in the first place. Now, if you've never been to a Property Investor Network meeting, I'd love you to come as my guest to one of our January meetings. All you have to do is click on the link below, propertyinvestornetwork.co.uk. All the events are listed there. And when you select your local Property Investor Network meeting at the bottom of the page for that event, where you normally pay your £25 to attend. Hit the button that says pay with a voucher code and use the word podcast to come to your very first Property Investor Network meeting completely free of charge as a guest, so you can come and try it for yourselves and see what you've been missing out on. If you've been to a PIN meeting before, obviously you know how amazing they are. Make sure you book for your January PIN meeting. We take a bit of time off during Christmas. We have a big virtual national meeting, which is a great way to meet people from all over the country and all over the world you'd never normally meet, because we have breakout rooms. But getting to your local physical meeting in January is a really smart thing to do to give yourself a kickstart into 2025. So as ever, I do hope you've enjoyed listening to this podcast and watching. If you're watching on YouTube, as ever, I encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. And if you're watching on YouTube, why not like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to make sure you're notified anytime we bring out a brand new video. Until next time, invest with knowledge, invest with skill.